Recently on the channel, we covered the full story of Deku vs Lady Nagant and went over her backstory as well, so for anyone who can't wait for the anime to get to it, make sure you watch that first. But with that said, my lovely people, today we'll be delving into the topic of this lovely ex-hero because Lady Nagant has made a reappearance in the MHA manga, and we need to talk about why. So Lady Nagant was sent after Deku as one of All For One's assassins that he met during the Tartarus prison break. We see her paired with Chisaki quite often, but mainly because he's useful to her, which we will come back to later in this video. Now, she used to be a pro hero who worked for the Public Safety Commission and was in the same program as Hawks, which we got to see a glimpse of in My Hero Academia Season 6 Episode 16. The Hero Public Safety Committee is bad news, which is why Hawks is happy to be free from it for now. They take young potential heroes and turn them into the perfect tools who they can use in society to hide among the heroes and villains while they clean up all of the hidden darkness. Now, in the anime, what we didn't see from the Tartarus prison break was actually a little bit of the aftermath, with All For One talking to several of the prisoners. And in that section, Lady Nagant makes a deal with All For One to capture Deku, and we know that he did give her his airwalk quirk to get the job done, but he claims that this is just a security deposit. So we don't know what Lady Nagant actually wanted in return for doing this job for All For One. Now, I suppose she could have just been happy to do it because, in her own words, the world would be much more transparent with All For One in control, but I do wonder if there was something that she actually wanted from the Demon Lord. Now, when Deku wins Lady Nagant over, she explodes because All For One placed a quirk in her that would activate if she decided to go against him. But somehow, Lady Nagant manages to survive after being taken by Endeavor and Hawks to Central Hospital, I'm sure, where they have the best available medical technology. Now, I don't know a lot of reasons why Lady Nagant would survive that explosion, but I think one of the only things that I could think of is her body is already built to be able to brace the power of her shots coming from her arm, right? So much like how Bakugo is already reinforced to face the power of explosions, I think Lady Nagant might actually have a little bit of inbuilt resistance to that sort of thing, and that's what allowed her to survive all the way until they got to the hospital, where I'm sure there they took care of her. Now, we haven't actually gotten to see much of Lady Nagant's time in the hospital. We know that she was awake for a while after exploding to give Deku and Hawks a location of All For One's hideout, and telling them that there are more assassins coming after Deku. But afterwards, I definitely think you'd expect her to go into a deep sleep while she healed, but that can't really be the case necessarily, or at least not more than like a week or so. It's been a few weeks since the end of the Vigilante Deku arc and the events of the Shigaraki vs Star and Stripe fight, so Nagant has had some time to heal despite the fact that we see that she's still covered head to toe in bandages, but in this time, someone must have also told her about the situation and the plan at UA. I say this because as cool as her appearance is in the end of the most recent chapter of My Hero Academia, chapter 378, she can't have just randomly spotted UA falling out of the sky, right? That'd be far too coincidental. So I definitely think someone told her to a certain extent about the plan to have UA head to a certain location as it flies over the ocean, and that it would be flying past her hospital room. But who could it have been? The two most likely options are going to be Hawks or Deku, and Hawks would have probably had more detailed information about All For One and Endeavor's area, while Deku would have been able to tell her that he was going to be fighting Shigaraki within UA and everything going on with that plan. So I do actually think that it was Deku who visited Lady Nagant in the hospital, and we are probably going to see a flashback of someone informing her of all the events that are going on right now. It could also be true that Lady Nagant has a communication device linked to the command center in UA, and that's another way that she's been able to keep track of the battle, but we still don't know, and we're gonna hopefully find out soon. Now, Nagant, knowing the plan, then sees UA falling out of the sky, and being the amazing shot that she is, she still manages to get the shot off on Shigaraki's hand in the chapter, even as UA is sort of bouncing and moving up and down from Gentle's massive bouncy air pad. Now, what is her plan moving forward? We know that Lady Nagant hitting Shigaraki and saving Deku is really awesome, but as much as Shigaraki is an issue here, I'm sure the one that she really wants to deal with is All For One himself. We know that Kurogiri sent Twice clones over to All For One's area, so while All For One has suggested that Kurogiri is too far away to teleport him to Deku's area, we know that it isn't impossible since Kurogiri can simply warp to within range to bring All For One that way. All For One also tells us himself that his goal is to reach Shigaraki's area and complete his body. But now with Lady Nagant far away sniping towards UA, covering Deku and I'm sure All Might, who is also heading out into the battlefield, which you can learn about in our most recent video, All Might Might is dying, would her normal hair really be enough to effectively stop the Demon Lord? Previously on this channel, I've discussed the theory around Lady Nagant's return, and given that my video about Gentle's return coming soon is absolutely right, I'm gonna rely on my theory from before and expand on it a bit to explain how I think Lady Nagant can get the ultimate revenge on All For One. After Deku's fight with Lady Nagant, he tells Overhaul that he'll honor the deal that him and her made to take Overhaul to his boss, but he really wishes that he could feel those same feelings of guilt for Eri instead. However, Overhaul still doesn't really understand that. Now, we never see this plotline between Deku and Overhaul resolved, but I do believe that Deku did take Overhaul to see his boss, and then that's just another thing that we can actually see helping the heroes in this situation. Overhaul doesn't really have any way to atone for what he did, but I think he'd realize that he's in a very key position here. Deku took everything away from Overhaul, sure, but here he is helping him see the old man again. Shigaraki is the one who really made things worse by taking Overhaul's hand. Because of that, the boss might not be able to be fixed anymore. So what if Overhaul devised a plan to take everything away from Shigaraki? What if Overhaul gives Deku a quirk erasing bullet that he had stashed? And this is ultimately left with Lady Nagant, who has all the trust placed on her, deciding on how and when to use it. And this could possibly be why Horikoshi chose to pair Lady Nagant and Chisaki in the Vigilante Deku arc as a way of creating this association between the two characters so that it can be useful later on. The interesting thing about the possibility that Lady Nagant uses it on Shigaraki is since All For One is the quirk that is controlling Shigaraki, hitting him with a quirk erasing bullet might really free him from All For One's influence. But from Overhaul's perspective, it's not really about saving Shigaraki, it's a checkmate where he'd be making sure that Shigaraki loses. If All For One arrives in the battlefield though, I definitely see Lady Nagant using the deleter on him as a perfect form of revenge for what he did to her. Because of course All For One losing all of his quirks and just becoming a normal man like all of the people who he stole quirks from would be perfect justice as he continues to get rewinded into nothingness. Alternatively though, All For One is constantly rewinding, so could Lady Nagant's depleter actually have no effect at all? Or is this also part of All For One's plan where he needs to be hit with a deleter for his plan to work in full? It's hard to tell, but regardless, I do think that Lady Nagant is going to shift the tide in this battle, whether it's for the good or bad, and I'm happy to see her back on the battlefield, fighting on the right side. But now I'm wondering, what's going on with the sparkles in her eyes and on her face? Is she going to explode again, or is this just a leftover effect from the quirk that was used on her by All For One? And now it just sort of makes her sparkle out of the cracks in her body when she acts as a hero against All For One, since there's cracks in her body and pressure can't build up inside of her body anymore, so she probably can't explode. I don't know.